Hello and welcome back to the second week of our Crime Writer podcast, Right and Wrongdoing. I'm Ewan Balshaw, and this week I've been speaking to an author a little closer to home. This week we have A.J Liddle. Now, Alistair was born in Edinburgh in 1957. He served 15 years in the Merchant Navy, reaching up to the rank of captain. He left to manage an aircraft fuelling facility from there when his daughter was born, and then moved into the oil and gas industry, which involved lots of moving around, eventually leading him to the Republic of Georgia. Now, ex-Soviet Georgia is the setting for his first three novels, featuring Lieutenant Donadze. And when I heard we had an author in Stirling writing crime fiction, I expected another Scottish detective.
Well, there's three of my books published now, and they're all set in Georgia, and they're all with Lieutenant Donadze, the Georgian policeman. And so the reason I write about Georgia is because I know it very well. I lived there, worked there for 15 years. I was just back actually last week. I was back for a week last week with my wife, and that's the first time we've been back in 5 years because of COVID. But we're just back for a holiday, and I did a couple of book events there as well, actually. But but I know Georgia very well. And when I first decided to write books, I was thinking, well, what am I going to write about? I said, well, crime, although it's not my only genre, it is my favourite genre, so I'll write a crime book. And then I thought, write in Georgia, because as you said, there's any number of books, a lot of them really good books, like Ian Rankin's a great writer, and the Rebus stories are great, I've read all of his, but there's nobody who writes about Georgia, and so it gives you a little bit of a niche. And the other thing as well, I think, one of the things I like about books is if you can enjoy a book for what it is. Like in my case, I try and make them kind of fast-paced and page-turners. And but if you can read something and you learn a little bit about a different country or a different culture, that's quite good as well, I think. So I quite like that in books, and that's one of the reasons I wrote my books in Georgia.
So having lived in Georgia, is this something you've experienced in the papers out there? Is this the actual crime scene that's happening out there? And if so, are your bad guys based on real people? Should you be concerned about writing about these things?
Well, people say that to me, actually. They say, you're not worried about setting yourself up as a target. I don't think so. Well, I hope not. But no, it's real crime. So was it no harm done that you've played so far?
Yeah.
So that's I don't know how far you've got into it, but there's a backdrop against an oil and gas, sort of gas pipeline being built, and my last job in Georgia was building a gas pipeline. So obviously there's a bit of quite a lot of my knowledge goes into that. The next story, if you ever get to it, is about people smuggling, and that's real and ongoing. And the routes I write about were real routes and really ongoing and horrible crime, but it's happening. And the third book is got kind of money laundering as its backdrop, and again that is real, and it's happened, and I'm sure it still is happening. So it's all real crime, but it's set in the kind of context of where Georgia is in relation to being an ex-Soviet republic, as it used to be part of the USSR, and it's right on Russia's doorstep. And Russia, with Georgia, the way it is with Ukraine, it resents its former satellites moving towards the west, and it interferes quite a lot. So there's always that kind of context going as well, and that's real, So another thing as well, all the places I write about are all real. I've been to them all, So when I write about, for example, I'm writing that moment about. Sorry, it was last book. It was Weir Park. I've been there, a few times, so I know it pretty well. So I'm able to describe it. But I describe it from my perception of it. Although I don't say, I try and make it kind of immersive, so that it's kind of Donadze's thoughts. But Donadze, for example, will be thinking about traffic, and he'll think, "Oh, this traffic's awful," but he just takes it for granted because that's what it is. He doesn't really. I look at it and think, "God, I couldn't put up with this," but he just looks at it and thinks, "Well, it is awful, but that's what it is." It's not.
Donadze seems to have a driving force behind him. He's He's a strong character, but he's got a little bit more compassion than, say, his colleagues do. It's just, he has to solve a case. He has to get on with it, doesn't he?
Type of crime which really gets them, isn't there? And you've maybe got to that bit yet, which kind of reveals what his driving force is. But yeah, there's certain types of crime which really get them, and that's what kind of drives them. And although it's quite self-destructive, he knows why it's happening to him, and he knows he should be protecting himself, but he doesn't, because it's too important to him.
So did you always feel you had a book in you? Did you always want to write? Or is it something that's come about now that you're retired and just looking for something to fill the time?
Yes, yeah, I did actually. I've always enjoyed writing anything, things like even I used to write when I worked in oil and gas. I used to like technical documents and financial memoranda, and even important emails. I used to enjoy writing them and just kind of getting the right words, finding the right words, and putting them in the right order, and just somehow it works. I don't know how it works, but just somehow it works. So I've always enjoyed doing that. And then when I retired from oil and gas in 2019, I knew I needed some kind of mission in life. Otherwise, I would just waste my time. And so I decided, because I like writing so much, I'm going to write a book. And then when I told my wife I was going to do that, she said, "Well, you can't just write one, you have to write at least 3. So that became my immediate objective. Well, I'll get the first book written and then write the next 2. And then it's a way of life and a job now. That's the way I see it. Hopefully keeps my brain active, and keeps me away from daytime TV.
So when you wrote your book, did you want to go the traditional publishing route, or did you always know you were going to go self-publishing? There's an awful lot of writers out there now going the self-publishing route. I've done it myself, and I know quite a few authors that have done it.
Yeah, traditional publisher, yeah. I did. When I first wrote the first book, I did. But it's notoriously difficult, as you probably know, to actually get your books published. And there's a whole lot of people who are now very successful who struggled to get a publishing deal. J.K. Rowling, for example, she's had so many rejections. Stephen King, if you ever read his book, he's written a book called On Writing, which is useful for aspiring authors like yourself to read, if you haven't already done so. And he got so many rejections. So it's quite difficult to get past that hurdle, because the first thing you have to do is find an agent, because publishers won't deal with you authors direct, except in a very few limited cases. So you have to find an agent, then the agent's got to find you a publishing deal, and then if you succeed in these 2 things, then you're on a kind of production line for the publishing house. So your book might be published in a year after you get your deal. So I did send out a few queries to agents for my first book, and then nothing. I had some words of encouragement, but there's nothing firm. So with the second book, I just decided to self-publish. And I actually do think it's the way of the future. You probably know yourself, self-publishing, you've got a lot more control. You can decide if you want your book to be published, which isn't always a good thing, as we've just discussed. But so you got a lot more control. You also keep more of the money if that's important to you. So I do actually think it's probably the way of the future. I think I know that some people who were traditionally published have gone on to self-publishing. There are downsides. It's self-publishing. You don't tend to get the same kudos as you do if you publish through a traditional publishing house. But I do think it's a bit like Uber taxis. It's the way of the future, I think. Another thing as well is you got to think of how long you're prepared to wait, because I'm 67 now, but when I started writing in 2019, when I retired from oil and gas, into my 60s, and I think, and you hear all these things, how difficult it's to get an agent, and I was just find a publisher. I don't know if I want to wait that long. I might not have that long. I was speaking to I attend some book fairs, and I've been on the stage for some of them, and I've met quite a few authors now. And I was speaking to one guy who's now very successful, but he told me he waited 20 years to get his first book published. 20 years. So I'm not that patient. I'm not going to wait 20 years.
A lot of authors now are looking at collaborations with other writers. Is that something you feel you could do, or is there someone you would want to write with, or do you like to keep your stories to yourself and have it go your way?
Yeah, I think it's very clever if you can do that. Ambrose Parry, who that's a husband and wife authors team.
Right.
Both very successful authors in their own right. But and I actually went to their last book launch, and I asked them the question: how can you talk about writing with a voice? So how can, if you've got two people writing, how can you make it seamless? And yeah, that is a challenge. So people have got different writing styles, a different way of expressing themselves, and I know it can work because there's some good examples of it working, but I just don't see how I could do that. Actually bring myself to write with somebody else and make it seamless. And whether I'd want to do that or not, I'm not sure, because it's a bit like losing control. And maybe I don't think I'm a control freak, but maybe it's just something I wouldn't want to do.
Well, that's us just about out of time. We've just got enough time if you want to tell us about your books and a bit about yourself. Just for the listeners at home, if they want to order your book, I know it's available on Amazon, just give us a quick rundown.
Well, I'm indebted to Ewan to give me this opportunity to talk a little bit about myself and my books. My name's Alistair Liddle, writing under the pen name of A.J Liddle, and I've got 3 books published, all featuring Lieutenant Donadze, a Georgian detective based in Tbilisi, the capital of Georgia. The books are No Harm Done, No Way Back, and No Rules Apply. So if you're interested in reading a kind of fast-paced book set in a different place, different culture, please consider these 3 books. Thanks a lot. Thank you, Ewan.
So there we have it. That was A.J Liddle. Thanks very much for chatting with us today. And if you do want to pick up his books, as I say, you can pick them up on Amazon. You've got No Way Back, No Rules Apply, and No Harm Done, all in the Lieutenant Donadze series. Join us again next week, where we'll have another author let us know about what they're up to. Thanks for joining us.